Welcome to the Interzone Roadmap Pitstop November 2018 edition. This is a bonus monthly show that will answer what's rolling out now for SharePoint and related technologies out into Office 365. These roadmap episodes will be brief, fun, and relevant, and they will focus on the now, what's happening right now. It's all about supporting good change management and based on feedback from you, our listeners. So, thank you. Joining me will be special guests from the engineering team to enlighten us on how they build certain features, the planning involved, and what they hope you'll do with it. And of course, we're always eager about your feedback. Consider this the message center for everyone, not just for cloud admins. We'll keep you informed, current, and ahead of the ever-changing roadmap. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started with this show. For this month, I talk with John Sanders, Principal Program Manager on the SharePoint engineering team, who focuses on all things web part, the building blocks of your pages and sites across your intranet. So roll down your windows, pedal to the metal. Here we go. So let's navigate through what's new. I'm going to cover a couple of buckets so that hopefully it's a little bit easier to digest in this audio format. And I thought I would start with what do you do broadly across the organization? We position this as how do you inform and engage with dynamic employee experiences. In another context, this is what you do when you're finished with all of your information and you're ready to blast it out to the rest of the organization in a final format in a way that they can read, they can share, and of course engage in a two-way dialogue so that people can find information and easily discover some of the things they might have a question about. The first thing that I want to talk about that's been released in November is a really big feature, something that was real popular in terms of people requesting it. It's something we showed for the first time at Ignite, and it is essentially a new navigation element that we call the mega menu. The mega menu is something that you can build into a communication site or a hub site at that very broad level to better organize all the sites that you're bringing together, all the information. It might be linked to very high-level forms that you want people to fill out. But essentially, think of this as a way to organize all of your navigation elements without it having to be multi-clicks down into a tree of drop-down menus. It's all right there. It pops out to be as big as it needs to be, and for the context of the page and all the information you're trying to promote, it of course visualizes all the information endpoints that people can enter to from what you built into a navigation. So the mega menu is a really easy feature to turn on, and in fact, I'll tell you about that in the next feature. But it's also something that we heard a lot of feedback on. I want to be able to promote a lot more information that's available to people when they come to this site or to this planning guide or to this new employee orientation. Mega Menu is going to get a lot of traction in terms of being able to visualize what's available to me when I come to this site. So cut to another way that we're helping people in this inform and engage motion is further control of what's going to appear on the site, things that people have been asking for to be able to assert the types of information or the logo or the look and feel. And you do this through our updated Change the Look panel. So Change the Look is where you would have gone to adjust the theme, that color look and feel of a site. It's now where you're going to turn to actually, one, turn on the mega menu functionality per site. You can choose that to use it or not. From the context of a hub site, when you use a SharePoint hub site, again, you're organizing multiple sites together, team sites and communication sites. Typically, in the past, you had to create a site, then you had to create a hub site, and then you had to decide to associate one site to another, effectively underneath the hub site. We now have this option where you can create an already associated site from within the hub site itself. Now, assume you've got multiple hub sites, and each time you create a new site to go and do that association takes time, takes some clicks, and it might even involve a few people to accomplish that. Now, if you're at the right level of ownership from the hub itself, you create the site that's already connected. It's already associated to that hub site, which means the news that's going to get published from that newly associated site will bubble up to the hub site by default. It'll inherit the theme. There's a lot of things that are the value of the hub site with fewer clicks to configure and connect them so that they're associated together on day one. And the last thing in this space, imagine now that you've stood up all these sites, that you've got nice menus, you've chosen the look and feel, and you're getting ready for people to come to them and engage on your content. You assume that people are going to start to leave comments, ask questions, and do that type of engagement that we hope people do. Now you have a better way to engage people, which actually will send them an alert, draw them into the conversation. And imagine at the end of a news article, you're layering in a comment. Now you can @mention somebody. If somebody says @Mark Cashman, provides a comment and puts some context to what it is that they want me to then be pulled into to review, to either review the whole article, to review their comment, they can @mention me both in web and mobile, and I'll be drawn into the conversation, again, drawn to their information to be able to then engage and provide an answer or just to take a look and to be in the know. And it just further enhances this engagement side of how employee experiences are going to be much more dynamic. Now, if we take a look at the other side of the spectrum, really we think of this as just the other side of the internet, where a lot of people are going to be collaborating. We call this teamwork. And if you think in terms of our inner loop and outer loop, we were just talking about the outer loop. Now we're talking about some new innovation for the inner loop. A lot of our technologies here land on what is the connection and the integration between SharePoint and Teams. And in November, we brought a lot of new technology. The first one is just the fact that when you have used a group-connected team site in the past, it had a lot of connections to other applications, but you had to take about 4 or 5 steps to connect it to Microsoft Teams. So effectively, if you wanted to add that chat component, which then gives you this hub for teamwork, Teams, to connect that to a team site is now just one click. If you have a team site that is already group-connected, and you're leveraging Microsoft Teams, at the bottom you would see a button that says basically create a team, which creates a new team, but adds it as just another application to the set of apps that are available to that group. The team site is an app. The shared calendar is an app. The files and the OneNote are just other apps or other assets that are available to those team members. And now the team members have a Teams instance for them to chat and share and gather their information to work and collaborate more closely together. Again, one click versus 4 or 5. And we know that there are a lot of team sites out there that are already connected to Office 365 groups, but not yet connected to Microsoft Teams. This enables them to bring that application right in line. So this just gives people that ability to take a team site that's already connected to a number of apps and connected to a Microsoft Teams team instance. Again, one click, not 4 or 5 clicks. The other thing that we've introduced, and this is on the Microsoft Teams side, is if you've got a set of pages or lists that you actually want to bring in to the Microsoft Teams user interface, per channel now, when you go to add a tab, you click the SharePoint tile, and up will pop a dialog box that will give you a choice between all the pages or all the lists. And if you go in and choose a list, it adds it so you have native full list functionality right inside Teams. Or if you've built a really nice mini dashboard out of a SharePoint page using multiple web parts, you can now easily add that page as a tab in Teams. So think of this as bringing the full power of SharePoint into Teams when you think of pages and lists. The other thing that we're working on is just basic metadata, basic ways you represent your content no matter where it shows up. So in Teamwork, of course, you're creating a lot of content. We know that some of that content will be based on pages, could be news as well. And in that context of page, you have page details. So if I go to search and find and my results show me pages, I will now see a much more managed result set, meaning I will see a thumbnail that I, as the owner of the page, said, when somebody finds this page, I want them to see this thumbnail, and I want them to see this particular description, which will just supersede what we do on behalf of all pages, which is try to choose the best thumbnail and a best way to describe the page. But this is your way to be able to add to the actual page details additional metadata. Add a thumbnail, add a description, and then in a lot of endpoints where those pages are then shared and discovered, people will see them more as you designed versus a little bit more on how the machine tried to interpret them. And lastly, we're adding some functionality so that when you're outside of Microsoft Teams and you're in the SharePoint side of it, that you actually will see how connected is this SharePoint document library? How can I get to share this asset into a chat from the SharePoint side? So we've added some visual cues. If you're in a document library and you click onto a folder that happens to be connected to a channel in Microsoft Teams, you would see that. You can click on it and start a chat directly into Microsoft Teams. So that's a look at teamwork in November. Next thing that I want to move into is what are we doing with those web parts? We've got a lot of new web parts and updated web parts. And in fact, towards the end of this section is where we'll talk with John Sanders, who manages what we do with web parts new and what we do with updated. And he works with a lot of teams to bring a lot of great experiences via the web part motion. So let's talk a little bit about web parts. Web parts really span both inner loop and outer loop. And we've been designing them so that when you go to use a web part, it's no different whether you do it on a team site or whether you do it on a communication site. The real value is you're designing the zone that you want to create for people to then bring in lots of different parts and pieces of information. So we've got a number of web parts that have released or been updated in November. The first one that I want to talk about is the Yammer web part. We've actually had a Yammer web part already in the service. The focus of this first Yammer web part was to be able to pull in certain conversations, either because I want to bring in one distinct thread, or I want to bring in ones that happen to be more popular and more active, or I want to actually pull it in based on the user that signed in. Which of the conversations are they going to most connect with? This updated Yammer Conversations web part that we're releasing actually brings in the full conversation. If you connect the Yammer Conversations web part to a particular group, it's the full-fledged conversation. You can like, you can reply, you can add content through, and it works just as if you were working natively in Yammer. But it's storing the content in the right place, it's giving you the right level of engagement, and it lets you see all the activity in the full feed of that Yammer group. So a very powerful web part. We think this will get used a lot in the outer loop, in the way that people combine communication sites with Yammer. But it'll also give you a lot of choices. If you've got an active collaborative group that's, bigger than X amount of people, you can actually bring in really nice, rich experiences on a news article and then have at the bottom a Yammer discussion that's already going or something where you want people to continue the conversation so you have that history and the thread in the same place. So we're really excited about this deeper integration with Yammer and SharePoint. The next web part is a really simple one, often requested, and you'll get it right away just by the name, but it's a YouTube embed web part. Already today, we've got the ability to embed anything, really, with embed code, but specific to YouTube in how it represents both the thumbnail coming from YouTube, how it plays back, and just the ease of setup. You choose the YouTube web part, you plug in the URL for the desired YouTube video, and it just represents it really nicely. Very simple, often requested, and something that now actually has a little brand recognition when you go to pick it from the web part, instead of having to know, to embed something, I need to use the embed web part. If it's specifically a YouTube video, grab the YouTube embed web part, off you go. The next one is really an update to a web part we call Quick Charts, which is really simply, and up to now, has been derived off of you actually manually inputting all the data. And it's a pretty simple web part, and you would type in the data and create nice charts based off of the information you put in there. Now you can connect Quick Charts to real SharePoint lists as the data source for the Quick Chart. So if you've got an existing list, or you just want to manage that information at a broader, deeper level, which lists enable you to do, you just point the Quick Chart web part at an existing list and then let it visualize your data. And of course, it's connected, so it's real time. If you make a change to the backend list, you know that your representation on that page through the Quick Chart web part will be up to date. And of course, you can have a number of charts on the same page, or you could have a list serve a number of different web parts across even different sites. So it can be used in a lot of different and very dynamic ways, but powerful in terms of what you can do with lists now relates to how you can create more dynamic quick charts. The last one is not a web part at all, but it's very important based on a lot of feedback we've gotten that there are a number of web parts that call out to third-party services. We talked about one today, YouTube. We've got the Twitter web part. We've also got some web parts that pull in. We've got a Kindle web part that specifically obviously calls external to Office 365, and most commonly the concern was outside of your data set. Now we have the ability for admins to control which web parts actually become available to their end users. And if admins choose or by policy, you don't want that information coming onto your intranet, that you can do that. You can actually have those specific third-party calling type feed web parts removed so that your end users won't see them. So leave them on. They'll get the benefits of those web parts. But if you turn them off, they'll only see web parts that pull from inside of Office 365. So some nice admin controls, often requested, and it's really great to see the team delivering on that. So that is a lot about web parts. It's time to actually turn to somebody on the SharePoint team that manages and promotes and does all this great work about what web parts are to become, and then when they roll out to make sure that they live up to what it is that they're supposed to do. So I'm pleased to introduce everybody here to John Sanders, a principal program manager on the SharePoint engineering team. Not just focus on web parts, but in a concise fashion, what it is that you do beyond web parts all up, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. I'm responsible for our modern pages and the parts that make those pages interesting, exciting, data-rich. And then we have a news distribution system that's built on top of pages and parts. So I'm also responsible for that.
So this month we've released a number of new and updated web parts. I covered those a little bit earlier in the podcast. But we really want to hear from you, somebody who thinks about plans, takes feedback. What is that strategy and philosophy behind web parts specifically, and how they complement people being able to build out their intranet on SharePoint and Office 365?
Sure. So when we started with our modern pages exploration, basically we looked at all of the classic web parts that existed for SharePoint. We made a master list and we looked at the ones that were used the most often. And then we basically built a backlog that said, for all of these scenarios that are used, what can we do in our modern stack and what are the most used? And then how do we break those up across sort of team sites and communication sites and modern portals? And that's how we made our backlog. And then we started to attack the things that were simplest and had a breadth play. So as you imagine, we start with you can add an image to a page. But then over time, we are super keen on getting user feedback. How do I need this to be different? How can I use it in my real world scenario? So we got quite a bit of feedback that said, hey, it's great to put an image, but I need to be able to put a link, and I'd really like to be able to put overlay text. So not only do we do a sort of a breadth play of web parts, but we go more deeply in areas that users have shown us concern or given us feedback in tech community, Twitter, Reddit. So that's an example of one that we augmented recently. So you now have text overlay, you have images. And similarly, that's how we just did our updates to Quick Links. We had quite a bit of feature feedback that Quick Links was very powerful, but it didn't have all the layouts people needed. It didn't have the nice visual treatment. So we spent a bunch of time looking through that feedback, looking across sites in Classic and in Modern and out in the world, and came up with a good design for how Quick Links should be better, and we shipped that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, off of that Quick Links blog post that we put to celebrate that was rolling out into production, that was probably the one that surprised me the most, where people were tweeting out pictures of what they had accomplished with the Quick Links. Look what I can do with Quick Links now. All the icons, all the ways they could visualize and organize.
That's great.
People were very pleased, and I think you guys made some nice decisions. But I'm also happy to hear that you took a lot of feedback in web parts and pieces from what people were saying. Here's what we like. Here's what feels like it's still missing. And so your job's never done.
Right. Well, we're trying always to listen to what users want and what they need. And then obviously you have to prioritize that against what you've already got in your backlog and a bunch of sort of that portfolio of web parts. Do I add more features to image, or do I bring list support to quick charts? Or, if someone comes up with another great idea, I don't know, like let's say the Markdown web part or code snippet web part, like how do we look at those web parts and again, look at that portfolio and figure out, okay, for the developer segment, we haven't given them much love. How do we give them a way to put code snippets and tell their story with modern pages and with SharePoint News?
So if we unpack the journey of a web part coming to fruition, one that we haven't talked about yet, but it is rolling out as a part of this roadmap episode, the countdown timer. It has kind of an interesting history of how it came to be, and obviously now that we're rolling out, the use cases that people will certainly benefit from, and it's pretty obvious with the name of the web part. But give us a little history of the countdown web part.
Yeah, so in our backlog, we had a countdown and count up timer, sort of as you might imagine, maybe low on the backlog. Always something that we knew that people wanted to do. It's a very common scenario. You see it often highlighted in other product launches, like an Apple product launch always has a countdown or a count up to their big launch event. But one of the things we like to do pretty periodically is we'll do hackathons within our team, and we empower everybody to build just whatever they think is cool and interesting. So we had some developers and designers get together, and they actually built their version of the countdown timer before Ignite. And then another project that we do is we always work very deeply with Microsoft IT and that team so that they can potentially leverage any first-party part instead of building their own custom solution like a customer might build. So we met with them, and it turns out that they had a need to build a countdown timer as well. So we actually took that Microsoft IT team and the hackathon team, we put them together, we gave them some design resources and some official bandwidth, and they've actually rolled together a great countdown timer experience that everyone in the world will get to use, not just people at Microsoft.
Very nice. And I can just imagine for the next hackathon that you're actually going to use the countdown timer to denote when is the next hackathon.
Exactly correct. There are a bunch of sites inside Microsoft that have exactly that.
I've seen them, and they really are beautiful. We'll talk about a really nice web part, easy to use, and very powerful, obviously, to help people understand when is this event, when is that project going to be completed, those kind of things.
Yeah, it was actually one of the other things we try and do with web parts is basically build shared components that work well across parts. So one of the challenges for the countdown timer, which is the same kind of challenge we have in our title region and our hero web parts, is that we want to overlay text on images in a beautiful way. And the way we do that today is with gradients. But one of the projects out of that hackathon exploration was how do we better understand the color palette in the image and better set the image color for the text overlay to be contrasting and within accessibility ratio. So that's one of the things that was accomplished, and we're going to ship with the countdown timer, and then we'll bring it over time to other web parts as well.
Very nice, very nice. So if we were to think what's next for web parts, whether it's a very specific web part you're working on, you want to share with the audience, or just something that in general people should expect web parts to be able to do X and Y. What's next for web parts?
Sure. Well, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, we always are listening to customer feedback. One of the big pieces of feedback that we've gotten so far is that some of our web parts have these beautiful layouts and other web parts don't get to take advantage of them. So an example would be the hero web part. We have some beautiful tile experiences. They work well and very responsive, go down to a carousel layout, but that's not available in the news. It's also not available in highlighted content. So as we usually build web parts and layouts, we make them reusable. So what we're working on right now is actually bringing some of those layouts that aren't available everywhere and making them more consistent and available in more places.
Yeah, and I would say just across the whole product, you and other teams are trying to make those consistent experiences. So if you interact with this web part, the next web part that you use will be easy to consume in terms of how do I configure it, what can I do, the things that people expect. The same as if people are working with files in OneDrive, it should be the same as working with files in SharePoint and Teams. That consistent experience of working with files translates into, sounds like what you're working on is when you use web parts, you should expect to use them in certain ways with certain power and value as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, the idea of being able to use layouts across different web parts. So now I want to show lists or links. Here I want to tell a beautiful story, use it in news. Highlighted content's a very powerful web part, but it for the most part has card and carousel views, so maybe not the most compelling views. Soon when it gets the hero type layout or maybe news type layouts in the future, it'll be able to tell a much more compelling story.
Excellent. Well, we thank you for your time. We thank you for the work that you're doing. And anytime that we get feedback or I get feedback on web parts, I'm filling your inbox.
All right. I love it. Thanks a lot.
All right. Let's stop the train a little bit and make sure that all developers have their listening ears on. You will get this way better than me. I'm just here to share the information. But we have a big release in this latest version of the SharePoint framework, version 1.7. This newest version allows you to build once and deploy in multiple locations, and that's across SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, and certainly in a lot of ways that you can build and configure based on the code that you're writing. So the first part of version 1.7 is giving you the ability to build a custom web part that's intended to be used for SharePoint pages and news articles, but it now also can be leveraged in Microsoft Teams, and what that means is you can build a custom web part, deploy it into SharePoint or into Teams, and on the Teams side of it, that web part actually becomes a tab in Teams. So if you wanted to build a custom component that did X, Y, and Z, and you wanted that experience to be leveraged across SharePoint and Microsoft Teams, you can now do that. Saves you a ton of time, saves you a ton of headache in terms of having to build multiple custom components. It's just one thing. You decide then as your end users where to use it. The reverse is true now too. A lot of experiences have been built as tabs and teams already. They call them connectors or just tabs that you create. You can now bring all those experiences as tabs and teams now in SharePoint using that same code and deploying them as full-page applications or full web parts that take up the whole page in SharePoint pages, news articles, whether they're the home page or a sub-page. But if you think about that, there's already a lot of value in there, and you have the ability to build custom tabs as well. Now, if those custom tabs make sense to bring in as full-page application experiences in SharePoint, you can absolutely do that. The last thing in SharePoint Framework version 1.7 is this ability to build web part connections using dynamic data that will help facilitate connecting one or more web parts together. And this will give you that ability to provide rich, integrated mini dashboards within the experiences that you build. And one common scenario we really hope that people take advantage of is to build a really nice, dynamic, connected experience on a SharePoint page, and then bring that as a common asset within a Teams channel as a tab. But the way that you would build it, especially if you're building custom components, is a lot more seamless, and now you can connect the interaction between one web part and the other. And the simple example here is if I've got a list of documents and a document viewer like Office Online, I can click on a Word document in the list and I'll visualize the Word document. When I click on the Excel spreadsheet that's just below it, the Word document in Office Online will switch to that Excel spreadsheet, and I can navigate through without having to have 10 web parts on the page to show all assets. I can actually just pick and choose as an end user what I want to visualize, and that web part will talk to the other web part to show the data. And there's a lot of things that we know people are going to build, whether it's custom or out of the box, to use web parts connected together in a dynamic way. It's time to give you a couple of teasers of what's coming in a month near you. What should we expect from December 2018. I've got two things just to give you a little bit of a tease of what's coming, and of course next month we'll cover everything that we've released in December. The first thing is page designs. We've had this concept of site designs where you can build out programmatically ways to configure sites at the time that they're provisioned. Now with page designs, end users can create a page and then save it as a page design for the next time. The most unique scenario here is, let's say you've got a newsletter you put out every month. You create your newsletter, create it as a page or as a news article in SharePoint. Now, when you come back the following month, you can start with the layout, maybe some assets that are common each time, the header graphic and the layout of where you put information. Save it as the page design, use it much more quickly. Very excited to complement what we've done with site designs with bringing page designs in December. The second thing that we want to tease is coming in December is audience targeting. And audience targeting will be something that will be leveraged across a number of different web parts to enable you to build and configure a number of different experiences. Imagine you have a number of users that are signing into your pages, your sites, your news articles, reading them on their mobile devices. And with audience targeting, you can say, I think this article is best meant for this particular role or this particular region. You can build in that metadata for the page, and then the experience to the end users, they either will or won't see it based on the credentials that we know are coming from Azure AD that says, yes, I'm a part of this audience that's being targeted, this specific content. If I'm not a part of that audience based on that decision that the owner made, I won't see it. And so think in terms of somebody signing in, and at the top is a hub site news part rolling up news from lots of different sites. Some of that news may not be targeted to them. They just won't see it. They will only see news targeted for them. The same can be true in terms of what you can do in the highlighted content web part. The highlighted content web part gives you a way to program what content you want to show. With this next mile of then, who do you want to show it to? Decide what content you want to show to what audience that you want to target, and you have a really nice dynamic way to build your pages. So that's it with the teasers, but imagine all the things you'll be able to do with page designs and audience targeting. We hope it's been a nice, smooth ride up until this point, getting you informed, getting you engaged with what's rolling out into Office 365 for SharePoint, OneDrive, and all those related technologies. Now we want to make sure that you have a good list of resources that you can fall back on and rely on for good change management throughout the year. We're going to put all these links in the show notes, but you should know this is where you go to learn more about the Message Center to Office 365 admins, the Microsoft 365 Public Roadmap, where we first disclose and keep you on track with when things are in development, rolling out, or launched, and of course our SharePoint community blog. We'll have all of the places that you can go to read and get up to speed, including the SharePoint Twitter handle and my own @mcashman, where I will be tweeting and retweeting a lot of information whenever it rolls out. You can always rely on a good source of information to stay up to date. Again, we'll put these all as links in the show notes, each episode, so that you can stay up to date. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Interzone Roadmap Pitstop November 2018 edition. A lot to share this month, a lot coming next month. Please stay engaged, follow us, ask questions, consume the material, ask us anything that doesn't make sense, push us where you want. We're here to address your best change management foot that you can put forward, and we're here to be the best vendor that we can. Thanks for listening.